My guest today is Ranjit Chahal. Ranjit runs a holding company of 4 B2C e-commerce sites across the alcohol, FMCG, which is fast-moving consumer goods space, a wide range of products ranging from wines, beers, and spirits. Thanks a lot for coming to the Holdco Builder Show.
No, not at all, Mick. Thank you for the invitation.
Perfect. Let's start with you sharing your background all the way from university.
Oh, well, didn't go to university. So I left school at 16, did what I'd call an old-fashioned apprenticeship, became a refrigeration engineer, and hence originally my interest in your posts, because they were about, what you called boring businesses. So as a refrigeration engineer, worked across many different industries, from food production to printing to manufacturing, even where I started in sort of domestic refrigeration repairs, going to people's houses and fixing their fridges, healthcare, retail, hospitality, like I said, food and drinks production. So did that. Then the business kind of changed, my role changed, and I ventured out into things as diverse as facilities management, railway infrastructure. Really from a refrigeration engineer background, it was really quite diverse. Then got to the age of 40, left the business after 23 years of being there. It was a family business. And I'd always liked the idea of the wine industry, maybe having done some work in sort of the food production sector and seen in the background how things work. So without any wine knowledge as such, I started out, and we started what I'd call a very traditional wholesale business. Servicing pubs, clubs, restaurants, all of that kind of thing. And like all businesses, we wanted more vans, bigger warehouse, more salespeople. But maybe because I was coming from outside of the sector, used to looking at it slightly differently compared to people who have always been in that sector. Looked at it and thought it's quite kind of archaic. There's layers upon layers of margin, and things had been done, in a very traditional way for a long, long time. About 6 years ago, totally started refocusing the business towards being an omnichannel e-commerce business. It's not something that had really been done from what we could see in that sector, but we thought it was right. We thought that we had the supply chain, we had the appetite more than anything. Probably I'm not from an IT background either, or I'm not a software designer or a developer. I just knew I had to determined to make something happen. And so, here we are. This is where we are now. There's a total refocus from the traditional wholesale model.
Before really going all in and talking about the details of what you're doing today, can you maybe share like 1, 2, or 3 biggest takeaways from this period of your life where you were doing various different jobs, if we can say? You said you were in a printing business, manufacturing business, even fixing fridges. What were the biggest takeaways from this period? Because 23 years, it's a long time,
I think probably what I've learned is that most skills are actually transferable. In terms of your people skills, your problem solving, how well you work under pressure. Bear in mind, when I started as a refrigeration engineer, there was no smartphones to look up a solution, or you couldn't call a senior engineer easily to find out, how does this work, or what do I do in this situation? So I think a lot of thinking on your feet, and sort of not being reliant too much on external sources for problem solving. And I think as well, relationship management, in terms of, like I said, I think those skills are definitely transferable. The same skills that you would use when trying to convince a customer that you're the guy, you're the engineer who can sort their problem out, and you're going to put this right. I've found that those same skills still apply, and I think the I think not having the background, say not being wine focused or not having an IT/software background, but having that belief that you could do it, you realize just how tenacious or resilient you can be. And I think those are, I could actually sort of directly identify that those things have come from 23 years of working out in the field in a very different sector. But essentially, there's a lot of crossover in certain skills.
You mentioned working under pressure. You got this experience. Have you always enjoyed working under pressure? Because it's a bit of off-topic story, but there is a watch brand, I think you pronounce it like Tag Heuer or something, and their slogan is "Don't crack under pressure." And very often we discuss this saying or phrase or slogan with one of my friends, and there's a lot of pressure in whatever you do in life. And I think the older you get, the more experiences you get, you start really enjoying working under pressure. So how has it been for you?
I think sometimes you don't realize that you enjoy the pressure and that you are actually good under pressure. Because I think particularly, as you know, we're entirely bootstrapped, we're not funded by anyone. But it forces you to be good under pressure because you have no option. And maybe in the same way that being an engineer 25 years ago meant that you didn't have a smartphone to pick up to Google what the problem was. You are actually good under pressure. You are good at thinking out the box, or you are good at problem solving, or you can use different skills to solve a problem. I'd say pressure is never comfortable, but I would say uncomfortable is good. And be that talking on my first podcast or dealing with people almost outside of your comfort zone. Yes, it's tricky, but that is pressure in its own way. And sometimes, you don't realize just how good you are at dealing with that.
Going from being an engineer to totally different industry, wine e-commerce. What do you know now that you wish you had known on your first day in wine e-commerce?
Probably just how fragmented an industry is, and it's global, and it has players from, you have the smallest producers. I mean, bear in mind, these are farmers, it's a farmed product. You have guys that just about have an email address to multinational corporations, with brands worth hundreds of millions of pounds. And it is a really fragmented industry. And that is I find that it was a challenge, because with every region or every country or every producer, there's a different approach and there's different expectations. But again, maybe going back to the pressure things, those challenges then bring opportunities. Because if it was completely homogenous and there were only 3 brands of wine, it really wouldn't be that interesting. But because there is that fragmentation, I think that in any industry, fragmentation brings opportunity.
You mentioned omnichannel. Now, there's an omnichannel, there is a multi-channel. Can you maybe talk a little bit the difference between those two, and what exactly are you doing today?
I think, from what I see, the difference in multi-channel is, particularly when you're talking about wine, for a lot of businesses that sell wine online, selling wine online was an add-on to their core business, which may be like traditional bricks and mortar retail stores. I think where e-commerce is our sole function, we're a lot more aggressive in terms of chasing a channel, or a lot more aggressive in terms of chasing opportunities or looking for different places to put a product. I think we can be a lot more flexible. We can be a lot more agile in terms of our selection, in terms of our direction, our pricing strategies. Multi-channel is not that different. I mean, multi-channel maybe starts with traditional retail and then develops out from there. But we, at the moment, are purely in the e-commerce space. So for us, it's having channels so we have 4 of our own channels. We have Cellier, which is purely a wine and spirits channel. Then we have Dranken, which is a purely imported beer channel. We have another wine channel called Six Bottles, which is more mainstream products. So then we have our FMCG site, which is in development, called Discro. And we've done that because we're an omnichannel business, we're able to segment those customers based on the data that's coming in. There's not a mixture of data between traditional retail and e-commerce. We purely have e-commerce data to look at and decide, well, okay, we will create a specific customer experience for this group. And they are very different. They're very different target markets. They've obviously entirely different products. And that I think is the beauty of omnichannel, is that you can do that. You can essentially set up a store purely for a very specific customer group, even a specific location or a specific delivery service. We then also run 2 Amazon Prime operations. So we do seller fulfilled Prime. So we actually hold all the physical inventory and we dispatch it, but it carries the Prime badge. It's obviously done to Prime credentials and specifications. So we run 2 eBay channels. We just started working with TikTok for FMCG and hopefully going forward for alcohol. So yeah, that, I suppose, is the difference between multi-channel and omni-channel. You are that much more focused on not diluting the e-commerce offering, but if anything, just expanding it. But with omni-channel, the key is infrastructure. If anything, we're a fulfillment business rather than a wine business. Wine just happens to be where we started. And in a way, with that experience now, we can say that we've shipped something that's fragile, expensive, people like to steal it. We've dealt with a product sector that's actually really difficult. So then transferring that skill set to something that's not as difficult, it's relatively straightforward.
You mentioned you're 100% bootstrapped, right?
Yeah.
So sales and generating sales is something you, I assume, constantly thinking about in order to grow the business and in order to keep running the business. But what exactly you do on day-to-day basis, on week-to-week basis, on how do you grow those channels or how do you make sales?
We have a very customer specific approach. And what we've learned, again, being an omni-channel business, is that there's no one size fits all. So the style of offer that will work on one channel will definitely not work on another. Our beer customers are very different from our finer wine customers. The margins are obviously different. So we have a rolling calendar of offers, but they are very much catered to the channel itself rather than a blanket offering across everything we do. We can actually be quite sector specific, and we like that. It allows you that, every time you're looking at making an offer, it could be the same offer. It could be related to the same time of year. Maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's Valentine's Day, whatever it is, but it's actually very, very different across the customer segments. And that's how we do it. We can't do one size fits all.
How do you build trust in this business and how do you lose trust?
I would say for us, regardless of the channel you sell on, the fulfillment is key. And that's everything from the speed at which you process something, the accuracy of the listing, the packaging you choose, the courier you choose. Obviously, there's a degree of that is totally outside of your control. Once the product leaves your warehouse, hopefully you're partnered with the right courier, to be able to get that product, sometimes hundreds of miles, across the country, and it'll be at their door the next day. If you order before 4:00 today, it will be somewhere in the UK tomorrow. So in this environment, it does seem that fulfillment is key. It's, just getting it right and being consistent. being consistently right, because we have a lot of repeat business. And a lot of that business, when you're looking at the reviews or you're looking at the feedback or you're talking to customers, they understand the product they want. They understand that the price they're willing to pay. So essentially, all you're working on is the fulfillment. So they want that product, and the promise you've made that it will be there tomorrow. And I think if you look at even our Amazon data, I think 98% of the time it's delivered on time, 99% on time dispatch rate. So we feel that's where it really is key.
Do they give you the feedback? In this fulfillment business, it's all about like you mess things up, and they pretty much see you when things are going bad, and maybe the products were late, but you mentioned you're doing everything very well, 98% everything is on time. Do they actually tell you that, okay, this was you're doing a great job?
You'd be surprised at how often people do feedback and say, oh, amazing, I ordered it. Well, if they order it now, they'll have it tomorrow. So people do appreciate that. But on the flip side, people also have that expectation now of, if I order it now and I'll get it this evening sometimes, and they don't. So sometimes there is too much expectation on that fulfillment element. But you'd be surprised, and it's nice when you get it, because it's a faceless transaction. We simply receive the orders on our back office systems, and they're picked and packed and dispatched. So you don't have that element of handing anything over personally. So it is nice when someone takes the time out to even leave a small comment. It happens more often than you think.
With fulfillment, there comes challenges. What are some of the key challenges you've encountered while running a business?
I think being entirely bootstrapped, it puts a very, very different, almost tint on anything. So any challenge, be it how big or small it is, whereas maybe in a much larger organization, or maybe one that's been, has a lot of funding, they might look at a problem or a challenge and say, okay, I need to go out and outsource this. I need to call this guy in to do this. Whereas we will quite often look at a problem, and the first thing you think about is, can I fix this myself? Can I do this? And then when you can't, obviously you then outsource it. But what it actually does do is, again, being bootstrapped and having that experience then makes you really appreciate that skill set when you do hire it. You don't then take it for granted that these things just happen by magic. You've tried it yourself, it hasn't worked, or you haven't been able to figure it out. You ask someone else to do it, or you pay someone else to do it, and you have that appreciation that for that skill set and for what people are actually doing. I'd say one of the biggest challenges personally is managing kind of your own expectations. You have a plan, where you want to be, you think what it takes to get there, and you realize that in getting there's going to be a lot of pain, but sometimes breaking that down into small chunks is a challenge in itself, and realizing, yes, that was a little win, or that worked well, or we had a good week, and 98% of products went out on time, whatever it happens to be. I think that's almost a challenge in itself, not realizing that it's not going to happen overnight. It's happening, it's just probably not happening as quickly as anyone would like it to, I think. And also I would say the mistakes hit a lot harder. When you make a mistake and you realize that it is entirely your mistake, and it is, and you are going to have to sort of suffer the consequences. I think there's a tendency to sort of over punish yourself for that error, or for that, for that lack of judgment, or whatever it might be. And that could be anything from a contract you signed, or stock you committed to, or a carrier partner you chose, or a software partner you chose. It could be anything. But I think those mistakes hit a lot harder. But then it also goes back to that resilience and that courage to sort of think, well, okay, it hits a lot harder because it's our money, but you have that determination to get it back on track or fix it, whatever it might be. So I'd say, and those are daily challenges, obviously, as they are for any business. And some of them are small and some of them are huge.
Maybe a bit personal question. I mean, being on your own as you're totally bootstrapped and you can't really rely on investors during tough days, tough weeks, tough periods. How do you, because talking with you, you're very, very positive, but how do you maintain this optimism during tough times?
I think it's more often than not taking that little step back. And sometimes I do it where you write things out or you look at sort of your business plan, but you sort of write out your thoughts and where you're going, what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And what you've already done is probably more important. And sometimes learning to celebrate what I call the micro wins. And the micro wins could be someone you've been chasing for a long time about working with them, be it a producer or a supplier, gets back to you and says, okay, yeah, it's taken a while, but, we'll consider this. Or finally selling a product that has taken you a long time to list and you've had it listed across all your channels and, you thought it was going to fly out, but it didn't. But then it does start to sell. Maybe not in the volumes you anticipated or you would like, but it still sells. And it's trying to remember that those things are actually important, that those are part of hopefully a much bigger picture. They're not even the challenges, going back to challenges, are not the be all and end all. There is a much bigger picture there. And all these small wins do help, and they do help you to refocus and they refocus on what's important.
Every business pretty much have competition. How much do you look at competitors?
Quite a bit, but more often than not, I try to look outside of our sector, because otherwise, I think with any product group or any sector, there's that danger that you become, there's too much tunnel vision. This sector's the be all and end all. Nothing. Everything that is important is in here. But whereas in reality, you're probably actually more likely to learn from businesses that don't do what you do, and be that good or bad. And I actually find that it's the unrelated businesses that teach you more than simply looking at other businesses who are in the same field as you. And obviously, e-commerce is it's a very broad church. There's people selling anything and everything. But I think that's where the value is. That's where, looking outside of your comfort zone and looking outside of what you do on a day-to-day basis, I think is more important. And talking to these people as well, talking to competitors and also people in unrelated sectors, it's quite interesting what you learn. And sometimes it might not be something that actually benefits your business, but it may just be something that allows you to look at your own business and think, oh, okay, maybe it's not so bad after all. We're doing that okay.
Can you say maybe what was the recent realization you saw in completely other industry and you were like, okay, maybe I should implement this into my own business? Maybe it was a marketing, maybe it was you said you're starting doing TikToks. Maybe there was something.
I think I would say the current biggest realization is that one of the biggest competitive fields in e-commerce is the actual fulfillment. So in terms of the carriers and what they promise and what they can do, and sort of the SLAs that they will sort of make, say that they can achieve. The realization that cheapest isn't best, particularly when you're managing customer expectations and, dealing with issues, which obviously at peak periods can be huge. Your partners, particularly when you're dealing with something as complex as next day fulfillment, are key. And the cheapest definitely isn't the best, because the man hours spent resolving issues far outweigh the savings you might make, and the damage to reputation, and also damage to product, obviously, to physical product, can be huge. And I think that's something that we've really started to take on board, because obviously you're always getting pitched that someone can do something cheaper and they can carry this and they can do this and they can do that. And yeah, we've realized that no, it's cheapest isn't best.
Let's talk a little bit about the operational side of your business. There are bad operators, there are good operators, there are excellent operators. What is if we can say, a dream for you or for your business, and what do you see you need to be doing in order to achieve the excellence?
I'd say, regardless of the sector or the customer segment or whatever it might be, I'd like for us to be a best-in-class operator. And that entails building on the sales we already have, but obviously investment in physical infrastructure, in automation, obviously in personnel. So we feel we have the foundations there, but we realize that for us it is about being best in class, but it's not about being best in class in, say, the wine industry. Or we are aiming to be, I'd say, fulfillment is the industry you actually want to be the best in class in, because from our experience, that is where e-commerce you either sort of stand or you fall, primarily on the basis of that rather than on the product you're selling.
Now, a little bit about the relationships. We talked a bit before starting recording. You said building relationships could sometimes take even 2 years. How do you build relationships in this industry? Is it different from other industries, other businesses?
Probably not so different. A lot of patience, a lot of trust, both on your part and on the part of the person you're looking to work with. I think for me, I would say the key, particularly when you're doing something like omnichannel e-commerce, which isn't for everyone, and I think particularly when you're talking to people from the wine industry, sometimes it can seem a bit outside of their comfort zone. So it's taking the time to understand their model. It may be very, very different to yours, and understand their needs as a supplier or as a potential supplier, and then helping them to understand yours, and where, even on a tiny level, where they may fit in. Because if they can come in and it can be on a small level, you can always build from there, but you have to have that understanding of their product, because you may be talking about a global brand that's sold in supermarkets. It has a massive presence. So people can be quite reticent about jumping in with someone who is very, very different from other wholesalers, importers that they've dealt with. So I think that is what takes the time. And I think that understanding of, and I think also in the wine industry, in terms of, I suppose, what I've learned is you're dealing with a product it's quite emotive. So the farmed finished product means a lot to people that are selling it and growing it. And with this industry, because it's generally people associate it around good times and good memories and good feelings. If all else fails, you still have the option to sit down with someone and have a drink and, just forget about the business and the numbers and everything else you're trying to achieve. So I think that is where it differs, say, from industries where you're purely judged on forecasts and spreadsheets and what you can bring. Because for a lot of these people in the sort of production industry, if they don't like you, they probably won't deal with you, regardless of what you're promising them. So I think that's the difference in terms of relationship building and management. That probably where it differs a little bit from other industries, and it's quite, I'd say, unfortunate that it's probably one of the few relatively people-centric industries still around. I'd say you meet a lot of good people. You meet a lot of people who are very passionate about what they do. Whether they're producers, consumers, there's a real passion to the product, and I think it's quite a privilege to have that and to be in those relationships. I think.
Do you go to conferences? Do you fly to France? Do you fly to Spain to meet the customers, or they come and visit you?
Bit of a mixture. Since COVID, a lot has changed in terms of this. Was purely an industry based around physical tastings, people meeting people, and it's slowly getting back to that. If not, it's a little bit of a hybrid model from before, but which is probably good because people have learned that they can save costs because these things obviously are expensive. But when you do get to do it, it's brilliant to be able to go out and meet producers, meet suppliers, and sort of see these fantastic vineyards. So that is the nice element of it, but it does happen a lot less than you'd imagine.
You said you're in a fulfillment business, and this is pretty much the key. Amazon started with books. Do you see you're expanding into other products, I wouldn't say services, but other products as well, other than wine and spirits and beer?
Definitely. It's something that we've already identified sectors that would be a good fit. Some of them have, if you like, barriers to entry, just in the same way as the alcohol industry does, because it's a licensed industry. So we feel that's a good fit. Because if you have that understanding of what it takes to be permitted to sell a product, you can transfer that to other sectors. And then there's other revenue streams which would be a very easy bolt-on, because when we've been building this, we've probably done it a little bit sort of upside down, in as much as most of the investment has gone in the infrastructure as opposed to on the marketing. So, we've spent very little on marketing our own platforms. A lot of that's been organic, which people would frown on. But I think that if you look at businesses that are very, very focused on marketing, and they'll have a huge cash burn, but then they might fall down in actually getting the product to someone's door. Hopefully that's where we succeed. So we feel we're now at a point where we can market almost anything. Once we start that spend, we can market almost anything. And then we have the fulfillment to fulfill almost anything. So for us, hence the move into FMCG, because the wine, or just the alcohol industry in general, can be quite seasonal and cyclical. Obviously, you have huge peaks around certain times of the year. Moving into FMCG allows us to even out some of those revenue peaks, and you sell products to a much wider audience. Because obviously, we're only dealing currently in a sector for people from the age of 18 upwards, in the UK anyway, that only appeals to people that drink alcohol. And there's a lot of people that don't. And there's a lot of people that buy other things other than alcohol online. So for us, we feel that having built that fulfillment structure, that is now ready for not every sector, but almost any sector. I think there's quite a few that we would shy away from. Anything, maybe things like clothing, purely because of the rate of returns involved in any sort of consumer transaction when it comes to clothing. We probably stick to things that are consumable, because the return rate is micro compared to the clothing industry. And we feel that's actually quite key, because we've seen a lot of brands really struggle with that return aspect, where they were offering free returns and free exchanges, and they've now had to put a value on that. Whereas so there are a lot of sectors that we feel would be a good fit and could run alongside what we're already doing without any real change to the structure of the business.
You said that if I'm ordering a 6-pack of wines today, I'm receiving it tomorrow. I mean, that's very effective. How much plays part in this, the impact of technology, and how much have you seen have changed over the past 5-6 years for you being in this industry?
I think technology has obviously had a huge impact in terms of your day-to-day operations and what's available to you, and the transparency and how you can track an order from when it leaves today to when it arrives tomorrow. There's a lot of analytical data around that we have access to in terms of your success rate in actually achieving that process. But then you can use a lot of the systems we use. You can track everything from which two products did people buy on a consistent basis. That data then allows you to shape your offering to those people. I would say another impact that technology has definitely had. We, on one of our sites, Cellier, is linked with Vivino, the wine app. And the product knowledge, if you ignore the wine aspect of it, the product knowledge is huge now compared to where it was. If anything, that benefits us because we're not offering a hand sell. We're not sending a sales guy around who has to convince someone to say, take this product, I've tasted it, it's great, it's like this or it's like that. We're telling people this is the product you're actually looking for. You may have read 10 reviews before you've actually ever even purchased it. And even when we talk to producers, they will say that sometimes members of the public will come up to them at wine fairs or tastings or whatever it might be, and they will actually impart more technical knowledge about that product than the producers themselves, because that information is all out there. So for us, it's focusing on the transactional part of that purchase, being the go-to source for the product. They've already decided that they like it. They've already maybe they've tasted it somewhere else, maybe they've drunk it in a restaurant, or maybe they've drunk it with friends. So for us, the key is being the transactional part of that process, and technology has really helped with that. And I think with a lot of what we use, we and again, this goes back to sort of your mistakes hitting hard. We went down the road of being very bespoke and having bespoke software made for exactly what we were doing. And not to sound big-headed, but we kind of outgrew that product far quicker than they could develop it. And we had to almost call a halt to everything and say, okay, we're going to reset. And we're going to go over to products that are quite open source. So when it comes to technology, and I think when it comes to sort of third-party developers and the apps and the things they can offer, there's not really a problem that can't be solved by someone sitting there and designing an app around it or some functionality around your existing infrastructure. And because we've gone with quite open source software, it's plug and play. You download the app onto your existing infrastructure and off you go. And then you have the support from the developers of that app to help you through that process. So I would say technology has totally changed this field, and it is continuing to change. I think there's a lot more coming. We use everything from AI software to do repricing, to do a lot of the customer interactions. The initial interactions are done by AI, and we've only just started implementing that. So for us, it really is changing on I won't say a week to week, and probably not even a month to month, but pretty much every quarter we're introducing something new that can, but it has to fit onto the existing infrastructure rather than have a bespoke environment built for it, if that makes sense.
UK is a huge market. Talking a little bit about the future, do you even see that you need to expand to other markets, or you're happy just serving the clients and customers on UK market in the future?
Well, the infrastructure that we have allows us to integrate e-commerce channels in other countries. And that's obviously everything from Amazon to Walmart to Alibaba, all of those. What Brexit has done, apart from impacting the supply chains into the UK and impacting product availability and obviously pushing up costs as well, it has made cross-border alcohol sales quite tricky because of the excise and the tax element to the end user. So when we do export, we will be exporting non-alcoholic products. So we intend to export. I mean, markets like the US are key for that. With the systems we use have a direct integration into Walmart. So there's some very, very good opportunities there. It's then almost moving away from the wine industry and saying, well, okay, this export market is purely for FMCG or whatever other sector we choose to move into. But yeah, originally, going back 5-6 years, one of the dreams was to have a cross-Europe e-commerce alcohol business directly to the consumer, but that is just almost impossible now, to be honest.
Let's think about 5 years in the future. What Ranjit does at the end of 2027, and where is the business in your mind, in your dreams?
I think with our own channels, to have more, to develop subscription-based revenue streams, because we feel that really is the key to sort of long-term growth and consistency and customer loyalty. Maybe even going back to the multi-channel example, is to take some of those e-commerce brands and take them into retail, so that people can have the wine experience, they can have the beer experience, whatever they choose, and then that in turn obviously strengthens those same e-commerce brands. I think I would like to see by that time that the channels we already have matured in terms of their marketing spend and their growth and their customer retention and their market presence, if you like, and then see where it takes us from there. With the model that we already have, if you said to me, would you like to be selling office chairs in 5 years' time? I'd say, yeah, probably. It's not too difficult. We can find the logistical solution. We have the admin solution for it. We have the fulfillment solution for it. And we know how to create platforms and build awareness. And I'd like to think we're quite good at product sourcing. We've worked hard, I'd say hardest, on building supply chains, on ensuring that you're as close to the producer, the manufacturer, or the sort of, if you like, the tier one supplier as you can be. So you're not simply reselling things that are already in the market and that other people are also reselling. So essentially all you're fighting on is price. But we can fall back on the fact that, yes, going back to relationships again, that you've spent a long time building relationships to ensure that you understand the product, you're getting it at the best price, you're committing to the most volume, and you're making the most margin, on each sale. But that takes time. But yeah, that's where I see down the line, or in 5 years' time, hopefully, that's where we are.
Now, as you've been doing that for 5-6 years, you have the knowledge, you have the experience, and you're 100% bootstrapped. That means there is no passive investor sitting on board, which is, excellent news for some other investors who might be interested in what you do. And we were discussing before the call, and I'm just quoting you. We have been speaking to brokers about the possibilities for someone buying into the business or strategic partnership to realize growth potential. My question for you, what exactly do you expect from an investor?
The business is at quite an interesting phase in terms of, it's purely e-commerce. We don't have a huge debtors book. We're paid sometimes even before the product actually leaves the premises. Understanding where we would like to go probably requires the kind of partner that is that is open to that vision and understands what the intangibles within the business, and understands that it's not purely based on the financials, it's not purely based on day-to-day revenues, and that sees the longer term vision. And we, funnily enough, listening to your podcast and following some of the threads and talking to other people on Twitter, and there's so many interesting communities and there's so many interesting conversations going on. You look and you think, well, okay, if going back to the 5-year plan, if you like, I'd like to have invested in our verticals, and to be sort of thinking, well, okay, say something like digital marketing, where we don't currently have a huge spend, but we know we have the platforms ready to benefit from a spend. Do you outsource that to an agency? Because obviously there's lots of agencies. Do you buy an agency? Do you start an agency? All of those discussions can be had. And I think there's probably, I wouldn't say a unique position, but it's an interesting position to be in. Do you become a mini Holdco, and do you start acquiring, if you're looking to sell office chairs, do you then go and buy an office chair business? So going back to your question about an investor or a partner, it's someone understanding that element of it. That it's almost not quite saying anything's possible, but pretty much, but if someone has experience of scaling a business, particularly an e-commerce business, I think that would really be key. It's, that various things have been sort of proposed in terms of like maybe a trade sale, maybe a partial sale. And I don't know whether that's where we'd want to go. I honestly don't know. It's interesting seeing some of these guys on Twitter and sort of joining their conversations and seeing the things that people are looking at and what interests people currently. That's a good place to be.
You've been doing excellent job building this business, taking care of your employees. But how has entrepreneurship changed your life and changed your family's life?
I would say it's been incredibly hard physically and mentally. It's especially omnichannel e-commerce. It doesn't stop. The shop doors are always open. You can't lock up the doors and walk away. When you come in the morning, there are already, obviously there's lots of orders, but there are already problems, complaints, issues. So I think that really teaches you a lot about yourself. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about resilience and determination in doing that. And it just makes you realize just how resilient you actually are. There's no set quota for you or your family to say, okay, this is how much pressure we can actually take. But when you're put under that pressure, you realize, oh, okay, yeah, I can actually do this. But yeah, I'd say it's also really broadened my horizons in terms of, and again, I would say I'd almost feel blessed that we're in the wine industry because it is truly global. You can buy wine from people when you don't speak their language, and you almost communicate by sign language and email. And I think that's really interesting from my perspective, just how that global outlook, and, if anything, talking to you now sitting in Estonia, and having that global outlook really does actually impact on your family life, and what you want for your family going forward and what's possible. So I think that's I would say is the sort of overwhelming positive from being in this industry particularly.
So I really enjoyed talking to you, but before we wrap up, how old are you?
I'm 52.
Favorite book?
Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela.
Married, single, kids?
Married with one daughter.
What car do you drive?
I drive a Golf.
What's the best investment advice you've ever got?
It's not investment advice. And I would actually argue that I've never really, to this point, heard anything that really impacted me in terms of investment. But something I heard when I was very young was a moment's help is worth a lifetime of pity. And that has stuck with me in terms of how you build relationships, how you deal with people. And I would say in turn, that's impacted business and investment. You know, you can carry that through to wherever you are.
Perfect. Ranjit, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Ranj, R-A-N-J, Chahal, C-H-A-H-A-L, or one word, or on LinkedIn at Ranjit Chahal.
Okay, thanks a lot for doing this.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.